Voice of the Mavericks, but just an incredible veteran broadcaster. Chuck Cooperstein joins us on 365 Sports with Paul Craig, and I'm David Smoak. Chuck, I saw a tweet, I guess it might have been Tuesday when all hell broke loose in golf, that you said this is when you wish you were hosting a sports talk show because of all the things that were going on. And obviously you were really, really good at that as well. Let's start, though, if you don't mind, with college football and where we are. The Pac-12 awaits their deal. They say they have a grant of rights, or they have reported that, and yet there's no details. What do you think in the end is going to happen with the Pac-12?
I think they're in trouble. I think that the four corner schools could very well be picked off by the Big 12. And again, I have no inside knowledge of this, but I think certainly Colorado and Arizona are very much in play, and it's hard to imagine that Arizona State would be willing to stay behind if Arizona goes. And Utah, is a really good program. And then Oregon and Washington can go to the Big Ten, and, they don't have to, gnash their teeth over going. And I think the Pac-12 is done. I mean, I just don't see how they extricate themselves from where they are right now. And I just don't see how a primarily streaming deal works today. Maybe it works 10 years from now, but it doesn't work today. And if that's the road that they are ready to travel, I think they're ready to run into an oncoming semi at about 70 miles an hour.
Chuck, do you think it would be best for them to make that decision now, or wait out 5 years when they have to, or 6 years when they have to negotiate this again?
For who to wait out?
For like Colorado and Arizona, if they're even thinking about it now, would seeing how the Pac-12 goes be beneficial to them at all if they have to do this again when everybody else does their media deals in 6 years?
I mean, if I'm Colorado, I'm going. I'm leaving. Because Colorado made a mistake leaving in the first place. When Colorado was really good, when Bill McCartney had it going in the 80s and early 90s, he recruited Texas like nobody's business. And he can't, and nobody since then, Gary Barnett or Neuheisel or, Mike McIntyre, anybody who's coached there, nobody has been able to get into Texas to recruit successfully. Now, Deion Sanders, I think, can recruit successfully regardless of where he is. But I think certainly with his experience with the Cowboys, I mean, the name recognition is just totally off the charts. And it would just make his life so much easier. Not to mention, all the ties that he has in Florida, where obviously he brought Kamari McLean with him to play at Colorado this year. It makes too much sense for Colorado to go back, and all it would do really is rectify a big mistake that they made in the first place.
Chuck, you've been, heavily involved, obviously, on the sports media side for a very long time now. You've seen a lot of changes and innovations and things of that nature. What are your thoughts when you hear about the streaming component of live sports? I know, the NBA's got their upcoming deal that's going to be just absolutely massive. But where do you see streaming, live games in particular, playing in sports moving forward in the entertainment industry?
I mean, it sure looks like it's headed there. But I guess if you are of a certain age younger than I am, and you, David, for sure, you can probably accept this more readily. To me, until the streamers can figure out how we can easily change channels from game to game the way we do now with linear television, I think it's a major problem. I mean, because you then have to, for instance, say, the Big 12 has their streaming right now, Big 12 Now and what have you. There's a Baylor game that's on there that maybe you're going to watch, but there's a better Big 12 game that's on ESPN or ABC. At some point you might want to go check it out, but you know what? It takes you about 25 to 30 seconds to ultimately get there in the best of worlds, as long as things aren't buffering, as opposed to instantaneously getting that done and being able to click back and forth. And until the streamers can figure that out, I just don't see how sports fans are served very well by it. And especially, and obviously the NBA, you can do it on a night-to-night basis, but in football, whether it's the NFL or it's with YouTube now or college football, regardless of where they wind up, you only have one day to do this, pretty much. And if you can't easily go back and forth the way you used to be able to do with a Sunday ticket, or for the games that are over the air on Fox and ESPN and CBS and what have you, and I just don't think people are going to be very happy with that.
Chuck, I also think that one thing that streamers are forgetting about is when you are watching a streaming game and the game you're watching is over, it just goes to a blank screen, right? Well, if I'm watching on regular linear television and it's over and there's another exciting game on that I can watch almost the last quarter of that they just take me to live, then maybe I don't leave. Like, I'm sitting there watching for even longer because a good game has popped on that I wasn't even planning to watch.
That's a legitimate point. I mean, I just think there's a lot there. And I mean, I think everybody is looking to the future. It's kind of like electric cars. Everybody is trying to get ready for electric cars, and yet nobody is really ready for electric cars. Nobody is ready to do that now. It's like you tell me that I will have absolutely no problem anywhere I go with my electric car, that I can charge up, and that I can charge it up in the time that it takes to put to gas up a tank in the car that I presently have. Then maybe we're going somewhere. But until we get there, I'm not going to go there. And I think there are a lot of people who probably fall into that camp.
Chuck, what do you think about the SEC scheduling decision, 8 games over 9? It's been kind of a polarizing topic, intense in some circles, but do you have any strong feelings one way or the other about 8 versus 9?
Incredibly cowardly on the part of the SEC. I mean, it's supposed to mean more, right? Mm-hmm. Well, if it means more, then it means more when you're playing. If LSU is playing Texas or LSU is playing Mississippi State in an extra game, as opposed to LSU playing McNeese. All right, I mean it's just that clear. Football coaches are absolutely terrified that finishing 6-6 is going to get them fired, and in many cases that might be the place. But you know what? In the SEC, this is what you signed up for. If you didn't want to be a part of that, then go someplace else and play in a G5 league, if you will, and go win 9 and 10 games and be happy with that. But if you're going to play with the big boys, then you know what? Play with the big boys. Don't screw around with that. Listen, I'm an SEC guy. I'm an SEC graduate, and I could not be more disappointed in the leadership of Greg Sankey, who I think is, generally speaking, is a very smart guy and who clearly wants 9 games, that he didn't put his foot down and say, fellas, this is what we're doing. Because he's done that in other instances with other issues around the SEC, but that he did not do that here is just a startling lack of leadership on his part. And, for guys like Nick Saban, who was always in favor of 9, now he's upset because, my goodness, Tennessee's good again. LSU's good again. And, and Auburn is Auburn. So like that, his 3 designated games that he'd have to play out of his 9 might be tougher than somebody else's designated 3. All of a sudden he's scared. What is that? I mean, it's disgraceful. It's just disgraceful. And compare that then to college basketball coaches, and especially basketball coaches in the Big 12. Clearly the best basketball league in the country, and all they're talking about, Gonzaga, come on down. Mm-hmm. UConn, come on down. The more the merrier. It's better for everybody. The better the competition, the better the league, the better we all are for it. And here you have the SEC just with their tail between their legs, and we'd rather play Samford as a game that means absolutely nothing to guarantee ourselves a trip to a money-losing bowl game, as opposed to taking on, whether it be in conference play, another SEC game that you might make $1 million off of, simply because it winds up being in your barn. I mean, I don't get it. I just don't see the logic, any of the logic that the SEC is using here, and especially now that the playoff is being expanded, and they're probably going to get 4 or 5 teams in the playoff anyway.
Is this the first time in a long time you can remember that they've actually taken kind of a black eye? Because they've pretty much been smooth running. ESPN, the SEC network, they've rolled. I mean, they've got a bunch of championships, but is this the first time in a while that maybe somebody checked their ego at the door?
It's the first time that that they've gotten bashed across the face with the 2x4. Yeah. I know. Yeah, it's been a long time. I mean, they've made a lot of pretty much every correct step since Roy Kramer in 1990 brought Arkansas and South Carolina into the league, and they went to 2 divisions, and they started the SEC championship game. They've not made very many mistakes, if any, over the last 30 years. But this is, to me, this is a big one. And you know what? At some point, I think in 25, when the deal really kicks in and whatever, I think they'll adjust it. I think eventually they will get to 9. But until then, whatever brickbats they take, they've earned.
Yeah, and by the way, Chuck, the Big Ten about an hour ago made them look really bad because they came out with this it's complicated, but it's a pretty innovative scheduling model where there's permanent opponents and all that. But just comparatively, here's Michigan's 2024 schedule. They're going to play Illinois, Ohio State, Rutgers, USC, Maryland, Michigan State, Minnesota, UCLA, and Wisconsin. And is Jim Harbaugh out there complaining about it? No, he's not.
No, I mean, and here's the thing. It sounds like, on some level, it sounds like the SEC was asking ESPN to pony up again, but for the extra game. But hey, I mean, you've already, you've got Oklahoma and Texas in the league already. I mean, that's what that was paid for. And so live with it. You're still making, you may not be making Big Ten money, but you're certainly making more than enough money that you're still the best football conference, and you can do everything that you need to do in order to remain the best football conference in America.
Tim, just wanted to get your thoughts before we let you, Chuck, excuse me, want to get your thoughts before we let you go on the NBA Finals. Denver pulling back out in front. What have you thought about what you've seen so far?
Jokic is the best player in basketball right now. This is a very, look, we all look back fondly on what Dirk did in 2011 and, had his moment. And, for those 8 weeks, he was the best basketball player in the world. I mean, what Jokic is doing, what he's done over the last 3 years, basically, if anybody needed any confirmation that those 2 MVPs in the 21 and 22 seasons were justified, he's certainly done that here, and probably should have been the MVP this year too. But everybody was terrified to give it again. So many of the metrics favored him. But, we've seen that before, like when Barkley won his MVP, that was after Jordan had won how many in a row. And Jordan was he was the best player in the league. By far, he was the best player in the league. But, Barkley had a great year. The Suns went to the finals. So it's almost like the writers and media felt, some type of guilt that they should give it to somebody else. And I think that, Joel Embiid had a fantastic year, but he's not better than Nikola Jokic. And it's just a joy to watch Jokic play. If again, we are all, many of us, David, you and I don't, Paul and Craig, I don't know how old you are, but David and I certainly can go back and remember Bill Walton playing in college, and the best of Bill Walton. And a lot of us, we never really got to see the greatest of Sabonis in the NBA. If you watched international basketball back in that time before he ripped his Achilles, that's what it looked like. He is just extraordinary, and has an extraordinary feel for the game. And like Jeff Van Gundy was saying last night, I've never seen anyone with a softer touch. I mean, anytime the ball hits the rim, seemingly it goes in.
Yep, like a pillow.
And it's not like we're playing in the Boston Garden, which had the infamous sewers, where it hit the rim and anybody could hit the rim and it would go in. The baskets are a little bit better made now than they were back then. But he's got incredible touch. He's learned how to shoot the three. and Miami is just too small. Literally, they are too small, and they are totally dependent on making their 3-point shots in order to stay with Denver. I mean, if you look at what Denver did last night, Denver had 60 points in the paint. What, they scored 105 points, 104 points last night, whatever it is. Scored 60 points in the paint. They took only 18 3-pointers. They took no 3-pointers in the fourth quarter. It was just a totally dominant, old-school butt kicking. And unless Miami makes their threes at the rate that they made them in Game 2, there's just no way for them to contend with that.
All right, so Tuesday morning, nobody saw this coming. LIV, the PGA Tour. You and I have been covering sports, as you've mentioned, for a long time. I remember when the AFL eventually was able to morph into the NFL. Namath didn't hurt because of that win, or the Chiefs beating the Vikings. But your thoughts about this story for this week, one of the biggest I can remember in a long, long time.
It's the biggest story in sports this year, and there's nothing that will eclipse it. I mean, we may see a great fight later this summer with Bud Crawford and Errol Spence. You know, we can see greatness on the football field, but there's nothing that rudimentarily or fundamentally will shake its sport compared to what we've just seen and what we've seen on Tuesday. But frankly, you know, I knew this was going to come at some point. It had to come. But that anyone could have thought that literally 362 days or 363 days after LIV teed off for the first time in London, that there was going to be a merger, nobody was calling that shot. But it had to happen because both sides were adversely affected. I mean, LIV had distribution issues, and the tour didn't have the people that they really needed, that their sponsors needed, that the networks needed, you know, to justify the prices that they've been asked to pay by the tour. So the tour was in trouble in a lot of ways, and so they made the deal with the person and the group that some would consider to be the devil. And sometimes you get into bed with people you don't want to get into. You do business with people you don't want to do, but you really have to. And you know, none of us know how ultimately this is all going to play out. You know, what the structure of professional golf is going to look like. But suffice to say that, you know, Jay Monahan can talk bravely about the future of the tour and everything that he's going to do. But there's only, and that the tour has the majority of the seats on the new policy board. There's only one person that matters, and that is Yasser Al-Marayan, you know, from the PIF. He's the one holding the purse strings. He who has the money has the most power, and he's got the money and he's got the power, and he will ultimately tell that board, you know, how they're going to vote and what ultimately the structure of golf is going to look like.
What do you think I don't know if you've watched LIV. I think I had 10 minutes of it on one time. Just wasn't interested, not because they don't have some guys that are elite, because obviously Brooks Koepka and others. But there's nothing that they're doing at their tournaments at LIV that you think they'll bring to the PGA Tour events, is there?
Well, the team aspect is coming.
Right.
There's no question about that. Now, you know, are they going to have shotguns? Probably not. Although I do see the value of shotguns because it forces everybody to play under the same conditions, as opposed to, you know, the way we do it, generally speaking, morning late, and then late and morning, going back and forth over the first two rounds. But I think, you know, LIV addressed some things there by, you know, having the lead group always play, you know, the course straight up from 1 through 18. And frankly, you know, listen, golf courses oftentimes are designed because we want hole 1 to be here. We want a drivable par 4 at this point in the golf course. We want a really difficult par 3 late, and we want a monster finishing hole, you know, on 18. Well, you know, what if you're playing a shotgun? Clearly, that's all thrown out the window. So there is that issue, but I do like the idea of everybody starting at the same time. But ultimately, you get to the weekend and you get to winning time. You play the tournament the way we've always played tournaments, with the leaders going off last. I think there's a lot of things to work through. I mean, I don't think you'll be seeing shorts, and I don't think you'll be hearing music during the course of play. Liv was trying to get to a younger audience, and I know there were some events, and especially overseas, where they did very, very well, and especially in Australia. But I think ultimately what's going to happen, guys, is that you're going to see a Formula One like tour where you'll have 25 events where the very best players in the world will play, and then add on the 4 majors, and then so that's basically 29 weeks of a tour, and then there's 23 other weeks where you're not playing, or you can do whatever you want to do, because the whole idea behind LIV was to play less golf. And I think that's ultimately the goal here, to make sure that those sponsors who are being asked to pay the money that they're paying, that they get their money's worth, and they get the field that they're supposed to get. So again, we'll see how this all plays out, but it's kind of how I see it is Formula One, or like the tennis tour. You've got certain big events leading into the majors, and then there are other lower level events for the rest of the people to play where they can make money. And I think that's maybe what you see. And but I will say that for the last 3 days, it's been almost impossible to get off of social media or get off the internet, because there's just so much to read, so much to try to wrap your arms around. And I think we're all kind of struggling to do that right now.
Yeah, Chuck, one of the notes in the chat room, we need more Chuck Coopersteins. We appreciate your time as always. So I'll block my number. So we'll be in touch with you. Thank you as always, buddy. Love you, man. Be good. Great stuff as always. Appreciate your time.
Be good, David. Thanks. Take care, guys.
Chuck Cooperstein.